Hey guys, how are you doing? Hope you're all doing well. I am here with a video regarding fragrances and the difference between concentrations. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have been to a department store or a fragrance shop of some kind, whether it's been a department store or a drugstore or things like that, and have gone to the shelves and seen things like eau de parfum, eau de toilette. You've heard of things like cologne, perfume oils, things like that, and you sort of stand there thinking, what do they all mean? Well, I am here to sort of hopefully give you a bit of an idea of what the differences are between all of these things, and to sort of give you definitions about what all of the classifications in the fragrance world mean. And I will show you some examples from my collection of some of these fragrances. So I will start from the, I guess, weakest concentrations and go to the strongest. So the first concentration is not technically a perfume of sorts that you would find at a high-end department store, but you'll find it at a drugstore or a supermarket. This is your body mist. I have got my Impulse Into Glamour, which smells nice. It's amber and sandalwood. This one is really not to be used if you're wanting a long-lasting fragrance. It gives you a bit of fragrance, not too much. They smell nice, but they're not really a perfume item. They're really just a body spray that you spray something. If you're wanting a bit of fragrance, that's not going to last too long. So that's your body mists or body sprays. So the next category is the cologne. And I probably am guessing that you're thinking, but isn't that what a guy wears? Not necessarily. Guys will say cologne rather than perfume because it will sound less feminine. But guys, most of the time, will wear an eau de toilette, which is the next category that I will talk to you about. A cologne is actually a category all its own. And a cologne is technically about 3 to about 8% fragrance to alcohol ratio. And typically a cologne would be a fresher scent. They usually last 2 to 4 hours on the skin. One of the most famous brands that do colognes is Jo Malone. And I've got my favourite Jo Malone fragrance here, and this is Nectar and Blossom and Honey. Ignore the phone in the background. But this is a gorgeous, fresh, sweet cologne that I would usually wear if I'm going out, but not really going out for a long period of time. I would be wearing something like that. Jo Malone does do some heavier scents. They do things like the, I think it's Black Vetiver Cafe. I will correct it down here if I remember it correctly, but they do some amber scents and some heavier scents, but they're all in the cologne kind of range. That will typically last 2 to 4 hours. So if you're looking for something that will only last 2 to 4 hours, something that you can just spray on while you're going maybe to the shops for a couple of hours, or while you're doing your grocery shopping and you don't want it to last all day, definitely a cologne. And I would recommend anything from the Jo Malone line if you're interested in finding one of those. The next category on is eau de toilette. And most of the men's fragrances that you will find in department stores will be in the eau de toilette category. And also a lot of women's fragrances, probably half and half, will be either eau de toilette or eau de parfum, which is the next category. Eau de toilettes are typically around the 8 to 15% fragrance oil to alcohol ratio. And for my pick as my example of an eau de toilette, I think it has to come as the #1 modern classic. Probably it was the very first, I guess, big unisex fragrance that really made it big. It is CK1 by Calvin Klein. You can see there I've used almost half of it up. Not all eau de toilettes are fresh. Eau de toilettes are typically fresher than an eau de parfum. An eau de parfum is usually richer. Usually you smell more of the base notes, I guess, in an eau de parfum than you would in the eau de toilette. And I'll talk more about what happens if you get a fragrance that's both an eau de toilette and an eau de parfum. Like, you get two versions. I'll talk more about that a bit later. But an eau de toilette typically lasts 4 to 6 hours on the skin. So it has some good lasting power. But depending on the ingredients, this goes for any of the classifications. Depending on the notes and ingredients used in any of the fragrances, it could last shorter, it could last longer. I have had, I think it's the Kylie Minogue Darling, that's technically an eau de toilette. Usually on me that lasts about 9 hours, I think, on the skin. Then I've had eau de parfums, which is the next category, that should technically last 6 to 8 hours on my skin, that last 2 hours. So ultimately it depends on A, your skin type, B, the ingredients that are used, and yeah, they're basically the two variables. So let's get on to eau de parfum. Now, eau de parfum or eau de parfum, depending on your pronunciation, typically has about, or between 10 and 20% fragrance oils to alcohol in their ratio, and they typically last between 6 and 8 hours on the skin, but as I mentioned, this will vary depending on your skin chemistry and also the ingredients used. The fragrance that I have chosen to show you an example of an eau de parfum in my collection is Mon Jasmine Noir from Bulgari. Now this one is actually a fresher eau de parfum. It's a jasmine fragrance. Eau de parfums are usually what I will go for when I'm buying a fragrance, just because I like to have the longevity. I like to be able to wear my fragrance most of the day. Now, what happens when you walk into the department store, drugstore, fragrance store, whatever, and you find the fragrance that you've been told smells amazing and you really want to try it, but you find that not only is it an eau de toilette, but it is an eau de parfum as well. What is the difference? Basically, what they would usually do if they put out both an eau de toilette and an eau de parfum is one will be either slightly fresher or slightly brighter, as the case with Lancôme Hypnose. The eau de toilette is slightly brighter. This is described as a solar floral oriental, so it is brighter. It's sort of like the flowers have been in the sun, so it's actually, yeah, a lot brighter, whereas the eau de parfum version is slightly richer, slightly deeper, so the vanilla is a bit more pronounced in this one, and I think it's probably more suited towards a nighttime or even winter. Usually if you try it on your skin, you will be able to see the difference in the two. One will be slightly richer, deeper, warmer, spicier, more sensual, something like that, whereas the other will be either fresher, brighter, lighter, maybe slightly more citrusy, maybe slightly more floral. That will usually be the case if there's a fragrance that is, yeah, brought out in both the eau de parfum and the eau de toilette. Now on to the parfum or parfum, or sometimes known as the perfume extract or extract de parfum. Sorry, my brain is not working. This one typically has 15 to 40% fragrance oil to alcohol, and this one is probably the hardest to find, or one of the hardest to find in your department stores and in regular fragrance shops, basically because of the expense needed to produce it. Basically, it is quite expensive to keep to buy a parfum. I think if you were to purchase a Chanel No. 5 parfum, I think they come in like a 7.5 ml and a 15 ml from memory. I think, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I'll put some of the information down here, but it can get quite expensive. It's parfums or perfume extracts usually will be the strongest in concentration, lasting between 8 to 12 hours, again depending on the ingredients used, but surprisingly they will not be the strongest smelling. They would usually, because of the way you wear them, they will be the softest, or they will they will stay closest to your skin. So you pretty much have to have someone stand relatively close to you to smell the fragrance, and that's basically because most of the time you're not directly spraying the alcohol on you, you will be dabbing it. So you'll be dabbing it on your pulse points, behind the ears, on your wrists. Sometimes you could possibly do it on your hairline or behind the knees, anywhere really that generates warmth. I don't have any parfums or extracted parfums from the big companies like Chanel or Guerlain or things like that, but I do have a couple of samples from the company Vero Profumo, from the perfumer Vero Kern, and I have 3 of the 4 fragrances that she has released. This one here is Kiki, and I've only used it twice, and I really don't want to use it again because it's so expensive. You can't get it here in Australia. You can get it on Lucky Scent, and I'll put again the link down below to both Lucky Scent and to the Vero Profumo website. But Kiki, I think I've mentioned it in a previous video, it's very much a lavender and caramel fragrance. And then I've also got my 2 other fragrance samples in there. And there has been another fragrance released, I think it's called Mito. Yeah, I think it's called Mito, that I haven't tried yet, but I would really like to eventually. Now, the next 2 concentrations aren't really found very often especially in Australia, but they're good alternatives to people who don't want to use a spray fragrance, especially if they are allergic to alcohol. Now the first one is a solid perfume. Now I've got 2 different types of solid perfumes. The first one is one from Estee Lauder. This one was a gift that I was given. This is in their scent Sensuous, and this is in a compact form. And as you can see here, it is almost like a wax, and yeah, so you rub it, and your finger, the warmth of your finger melts it, and then again you rub it or dab on your pulse points, and the fragrance will release through the warmth as you rub the fragrance. I do have another solid perfume in the same form from Sarah Jessica Parker, which I won't show you because it's exactly the same as this, but I do have another solid perfume in a different style. This is another type of solid perfume that I have, and this is from Lush, from the Gorilla perfume line, and this is in the scent Vanillary. This one here, rather than it being almost a waxy consistency, this one it's almost a butter. This one is made, I think the main ingredients are jojoba oil, castor oil, candelia wax, and then it has the perfume, titanium dioxide, and then the fragrances, vanilla, jasmine, tonka bean, things like that. But this one, to warm it up, you will rub it on the area that you want the fragrance. So I usually will rub it on my wrist, and it will melt on your wrist and release the fragrance. So they are the two different types of solid perfumes that I have in my collection. And the last fragrance concentration that I have for you is a perfume oil. Now it will vary depending on the company that you go with as to what fragrance, like what oil base they use. Some use jojoba oil, almond oil, coconut oil. Just basically check the company's websites. They will always tell you what their base is somewhere. The one that I have here is from Sage Mikado, and this is Onyx. Perfume oils are quite concentrated, so most of the time you will get them in a roll-on rather than a spray. It is quite easier, or it is much easier to have it as a roll-on than it is as a spray. So yeah, you just roll it on and away you go. And again, depending on the ingredients used, as to whether it will be a stronger fragrance, whether it will last a certain amount of time. I've had fragrance oils that have lasted as long as a cologne or an eau de cologne. I've had fragrance oils such as this one here last up to 12 hours. So it just depends again on the ingredients and yeah, your skin chemistry as to how long the fragrance will last. But I will list a few of my favourite fragrance companies that do oils on my fragrance blog. So if you go to the link down below, I will have not only the video that you're watching right now, I will have the links to some of my favourites on that blog page, as well as a lot of the information in this video, such as the concentrations, the lasting power for each of the concentrations, and the sort of the times, the average times that they will last. But if you have any questions on fragrances, whether it be any more information about concentrations, whether you have any information or any questions about fragrance families, fragrance types, the difference between mainstream and independent companies and niche fragrances, anything to do with fragrances, please let me know. I've been working in the fragrance industry for almost 7 years. I know I don't know everything, but I will do my very best to answer any fragrance questions that you throw at me. Yeah, I will do my very, very best. So that is it for this video. I hope this was informative and okay. But yeah, that's it for now. So until next time, take care. Bye.